was a prophet to Israel at a time when the Hebrew people were wavering in their commitment to Yahweh. Some of the local Near East deities were looking rather attractive to them. And if the people's fickleness wasn't enough, Elijah has to deal with Ahab, the narcissistic king of Israel, who did more to provoke God's anger than all of the kings of Israel before him. Ahab is married to Jezebel, a foreigner who worshiped Baal, a fertility god thought to control the weather, among other things. Her husband built a sanctuary for Baal in Israel's capital and proceeded to worship this false god himself. Let's just say the exchanges between Elijah and Ahab were strained at best. The most dramatic exchange happens during the drought the prophet had told Ahab was coming years earlier. It's a showdown between Elijah on God's side and hundreds of the prophets of Baal on the king's side. Despite working themselves into a frenzy, the prophets of Baal are unable to get their God to set fire to a sacrificial offering. Elijah's God, Yahweh, on the other hand, provides a dazzling pyrotechnic display that consumes a water-drenched altar. That ends the drought. Elijah then orders all of the prophets of Baal to be killed. Well, that angers Jezebel, who sends her troops after Elijah. He escapes into the wilderness, where he has a meltdown. His confidence gone, he plops down under the shade of a solitary juniper tree and begins to lament, "O Lord, take away my life, for I alone am left." But God is not finished with Elijah. The prophet is provided with enough sustenance to make it to the top of Mount Horeb, which we know better as Mount Sinai, the place where Moses had a dramatic encounter with the divine. There, Elijah finds a cave for the night. And so the scene is set for this morning's episode. I'm reading from the 19th chapter of 1 Kings, beginning with the last half of the 9th verse. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your peoples with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. A howling windstorm strong enough to split mountains and break rocks. Then an earthquake. Then a fire, and then the sound of sheer silence, a still, small voice. This is the fourth installment of a sermon series we're calling Come to Your Senses. We've been exploring ways in which we experience God through our five senses. How might we hone our senses to deepen our faith journey and increase our awareness of God's presence? Today's focus is our sense of hearing. A researcher was digging into the cause of hearing loss, especially due to aging. His research took him to Africa, where he studied the Maban tribe. Even when they're very old, Mabans can hear a whisper from 200 yards away, the equivalent of almost 2 city blocks, all because they live a very quiet life. That is so hard to fathom given our context. We are immersed in a cacophony of sound and noise, constant bombardments from TVs and smartphones and computers. Toys and gadgets in stores talk to us as we walk by them. Automated tunes play when we're on hold on a telephone call. Muzak fills the air in stores and restaurants. Timers and alarm clocks, car horns and train whistles, sirens, class bells, surround sound, Alexa, Siri. We pop in earbuds and pipe in white noise to drown out the rest of the racket. How in this thunderous world of ours do we, or can we, hear God's voice? You've probably heard the story about the fella who chose not to heed a mandatory evacuation ahead of a devastating storm. "I trust God," he said. "If I'm in danger, God will send a divine miracle to save me." Well, the neighbors came by as they're heading out. "We have room for you in our car." "No thanks. I have faith that God will save me." The water reaches the porch steps. Another neighbor paddles up in a canoe. "Quick, jump in." "No thanks. God will save me." Water pours into the first floor, forcing the man to retreat to the second floor. The police come by in a motorboat. "We're here to rescue you." The man waves them off. "Use your time to save someone else. I have faith that God will save me." The waters keep rising. The man climbs out onto his roof. A helicopter crew spots him and drops a rope ladder. "Grab on so we can pull you up." "No, thank you. God will save me." Shortly after that, the house breaks apart and the man is swept away to his death. When he reaches heaven, this waterlogged fella stands before his maker. "I put all of my faith in you, God. Why didn't you come and save me?" God says, "My child, I sent you a warning, a car, a canoe, a motorboat, and a helicopter. What more were you looking for?" The sound of sheer silence, the voice of stillness, it gets Elijah's attention. He wraps himself in his mantle and comes out of his cave. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" God then gives Elijah instructions about where to go and what to do next. If God is to be heard above the din of noise in this world and in our lives, it will take something incredibly dramatic. Perhaps the way we want or need or expect God's voice to be is something big and booming and extraordinary. But maybe, just maybe, sometimes the most extraordinary and most dramatic of all is stillness. If we want to hear God, perhaps we need to be intentional about taking opportunities to stop, to tune our ears, to listen for those gentle cadences of God's whisper. And it's a tough way for it to happen, no doubt, but what if these present days of social isolation and sheltering in place is that big, huge, dramatic thing we've needed to be still enough, long enough to listen for God's whisper? It's a challenge. We are filling the airwaves more than ever right now with movies and music and all kinds of amazing and creative things on social media to stay connected with one another. That's what we do. That's what we need to do to a point. But these days also offer the amazing, albeit sometimes uncomfortable, gift of quiet and stillness. When's the last time you sat for 5 minutes of silence, Not talking, not reading, not watching TV, not doing anything but sitting in silence, doing nothing more than breathing. When's the last time you sat outside or by an open window to hear the birds sing? Or left your earbuds at home while you took a walk or a run so that you could listen to the sounds around you? When have you pondered what in your life is necessary sound and what is unwanted noise? And how might you turn down the volume on that noise? God is still speaking. The poet Rumi writes that every moment contains 100 messages from God, every moment. The question is, are we doing all we can to listen?